The final major part that we have to work on is going to be about adding sound. That, fortunately, is going to be really easy. All you need is one more node. This one is called an audio stream player, and it plays audio. That's kind of all it does. It's not terribly complicated. Although, on top of that, there is a generic one for 2D and one for 3D. The difference between them is that the latter two take the location into consideration, which basically means that the further away the audio source is, the quieter it becomes. Other than that, they are basically identical. There's one more thing that is important to note, and that is when you want to play audio in an animation player. For example, in our case, we're going to play an explosion sound in the explosion animation. To do that, you have to create a separate audio track. Otherwise, you are not going to hear any audio. I'm not quite sure why that is the case, but it's quite easy to implement. Let's do all of that in practice. Here we are back in Godot, and first of all, we have to import a couple of audio files. For that, if you look at the nodes, you will find an audio folder. And there we have a couple of audio files, nothing complicated. This you simply want to drag into Godot, and then you have an audio folder. This one contains, well, the same thing you have just seen. And I suppose, just to get started, I want to play the laser sound as soon as we are shooting a laser, which in Godot term means I want to open the laser scene. And as soon as we are creating this laser, I want to play the sound. For that, we want to add another node that is going to be called an audio stream player. And there you can see we have an audio stream player, an audio stream player 2D, and an audio stream player 3D. The 3D version you only want to use for a 3D game, quite obviously. And the decision if you want to use a 2D one or a normal player depends on if the location of this audio file is important, which for the laser is the case. Because if the scout is shooting the laser far away, it should be less loud. So we want to use an audio stream player 2D. Now we have a new node, and on the right you have a couple of settings. The one we care about the most is called stream. Right now it's empty, and like for sprite, we have to drag in a file. Once you have that, you can test this file right away. If you click on playing, you should be hearing a laser sound. You can also modify a few more things. For example, you can change the volume or the pitch. I'm not going to touch either of them because I'm happy with the sound as it is, but play around with this if you are interested. There's also an area mask to choose different kinds of areas, but I don't care about any of that. I just want to play some sound. To actually play the sound when this laser is being created, you can approach it in two ways. You can go to the script, and when the laser is ready, meaning inside of the ready function, you can get the audio stream player 2D and then simply play the sound. If you now run all of this, shoot somewhere, and you get the sound. That being said, all of this can be done even easier. If you go back to the node itself, you can simply select autoplay, and then the sound is going to play automatically. Which means if I run the entire thing again, we get the sound once more without writing any code. And well, that's basically what you have to know about the basics of sound. It doesn't get that much more complicated. Although there are two particulars that you do want to be aware of. Number one, if you are using an animation player, for example, if you want to work with the grenade. There we have an animation player, and I want to play a sound once we have an explosion. For that, you could, well, first of all, we have to add an audio stream player. The position here is also important, so this needs to be a 2D one. And in there, you could add a track, a property track, and then add the audio stream player. You could do that, but it would never play sound. Instead, how you would have to use them is with add track and then add audio playback track. I believe the reason why that is because that way you can have some special setup. Now, first of all though, you have to select the audio file you want to play, or rather the audio stream player node. In my case, there's only one, and in there now we have audio clips. The way you would use that is simply to insert a key, then click on the key, and then you can insert the audio file you want to play. In my case, this would be explosion.wav. With that, I can play all of it, and we have a sound. What you could also do is then add more keys with different audio files, although this isn't what I want to do. Next up, there's one more important thing I want to cover. I want to play battle theme A while the game is running, and this should simply start at the beginning of the game and then play continuously. But there is an issue. So for example, what you could be doing is in the outside scene, add an audio stream player and then play it, and then do the same thing for the inside scene. And let me close the laser and the grenade, we don't need either. If you added an audio stream player to both of these, or one to the level, then the issue would be if you load either of them, the audio file would start again from scratch. As soon as you're loading a new scene, you're loading all of it, which means if there is an audio stream player in there, it is going to start playing. And it is going to play from the start. Instead, what you would rather want to do is to create a global scene, which means I want to create a new scene with a node, and we can call this one, let's just call it music. This is going to get one node, which is an audio stream player. This one does not care about the position. And there, I want to add battle theme A, and then click on autoplay. Once I have that, I can go to project settings, auto load, and I want to go to my globals. Oh, and I forgot to save the scene. I want to save it under globals, music.tscn is fine. And now I can go to project, auto load, and load music.tscn. Then we can click on add, and now we have another global scene. Since we have set this to autoplay, it should play right from the beginning. Let's try. Okay, perfect. That seems to be working. What is even more important now is that this music is going to continue playing across multiple scenes. Which means if I start at the outside level, we have the same music. All of this should be still fairly straightforward. There's one more thing I do want to do inside of this global scene, and that is I want to loop this music file. For that, you have to go to stream and then click on the audio file. And there you get a few more options. Although right now, if I click on loop, nothing is going to happen. That is because when we imported battle theme A, we have to specify during the import that it can be looped. I have no idea why that is necessary, but it's just the case. It's quite easy to fix. If you go to import next to scene and you have the file selected, you have to enable loop. Now we can re-import it, and now we have loop enabled. Really strange system, but it is what it is. Although now this is all we needed for this scene, so I can close it. Now there's one more issue we really have to work on, and that is when we hit any of the enemies. For example, if I open the bug, we can add a sound quite easily to play something when they get hit. For that, we have a hit function. Unfortunately, when they are attacking. In the bug case, this would be inside of this function. When an enemy is attacking the player, we store all of that information inside of globals.health. This doesn't actually touch the player directly. Which means to play a sound on the player being hit, we have to work inside of globals. So globals, and we have to figure out how to play a sound purely from a script. And that could be a fun thing to figure out. It's not actually that hard. The way you want to approach it, all the way at the top, I want to create a variable that is going to be a player hit sound. This has to be an audio stream player 2D. The trick with this one is that we can simply create entirely new nodes in script. At the bottom of this script, I want to create a ready function, which is still going to run as soon as this script here is ready. Inside of there, I want to get my player hit sound and assign it an audio stream player 2D. And to create a new node, you want the new method. This is going to create a whole new node. Next up, on this node, we have to specify what kind of sound we want to play. So what kind of sound from these we want to use. This we can set with player hit sound and then stream needs to load a file. The file we want to use is called solid impact, and you can simply drag it in there. That's all you need. Finally, there's one more thing that we do have to do. And let me give all of this a bit more space. At the moment, we have a node, and this node has a stream, so a file. The last thing we have to do is to add this node to this script, which we do with add child. We have seen this one before, and we want to add the player hit sound. What this one now is going to do, if I run the entire the basic way you have to think about it is that I earlier said that this is just a script, but that wasn't entirely correct. Anytime you create a script in Godot, this script has to be attached to a node. And if you just create a script, so if you go to the file system on the left and click on new script, Godot is going to create a basic node and then attach a script right away to it. Meaning you always have a node when you have a script. But alright, now that we have that, all we have to do is to play this player hit sound. This is going to happen inside of this health. More specifically, inside of the second if statement, we are checking if the player gets hurt. I want to play the player hit sound with the play method. Now that we have that, back in the outside scene under enemies, I want to add the scout, and we can place him a bit further down so I can actually select him, and let's put him there. If I now run the game, all of that seems to be perfectly fine, so now we can do an exercise. All I want you to do is to add a sound to the crates and toilets once they get hit, and on top of that, add a sound to the bug, drone, and scout once they get hit. Pause the video now and try to implement that one. I guess we can start with the bug. This one, first of all, is going to need an audio stream player 2D, and for the audio, I want to have organic impact. This is going to be the stream, and now I have to figure out when to play it. This we can figure out in the script, and it's quite easy. I talked about this earlier. We have to work inside of this if statement in the hit function. All we have to do is get the audio stream player 2D and then play the thing. If I now go back to outside and I am going to add the bug, and it's going to be quite hard to drag him because we have so much stuff in there. If I now run the entire thing, and we definitely get a flashy kind of sound. Although for now, I want to remove all of the enemies because they are going to get quite confusing. That fixes the bug. Next up, I want to work on the scout. The scout already plays a sound. Every time he shoots a laser, he is playing the same laser scene as the player, which already contains the laser sound. Although on top of that, I want to also give him an audio stream player 2D. And you could also rename them. Let's call it the hit sound. It's really up to you. For this one, I want to use solid impact, the same thing we have for the player. And then inside of the script, we are doing the same thing we have done for the bug. I want to get the hit sound and then play it. That covers another part. And next up, I want to work on the drone. For the drone, we need 2 bits, which means I want to add a node, and this node I'm going to rename to sounds. The first sound is going to be an audio stream player 2D. Let's call this one the hit sound. The hit sound is going to be solid impact, and this we want to play once the drone gets hit, which we have done a couple of times at this point. We are working inside of the hit function, and I want to get the hit sound and play it. That should be quite easy. And next up, I want to add another audio stream player, which is going to be the explosion sound. This one is going to get explosion.wav, and this we want to play via the animation player, more specifically inside of explosion. For that, once again, inside of add track, we have to add an audio playback track with explosion sound. And I just realized, since we're using that inside of the explosion sound, we don't have to add this stream in there. This happens all in the animation player. What I want to do in there is to insert a key, and there I can insert the explosion sound, like so. And now I want to line this up a bit better so it starts with the animation. Let's try all of that. So in the outside scene, I want to add a drone, and this drone we have to move over there. And while we are testing all of this, I think it's going to be a good idea to get the global music scene and disable autoplay. That way I can actually hear what's going on. Let's try all of this now. We get one sound, and if I hit the drone often enough, we get a very faint explosion sound. This we probably want to make a bit louder. So in the drone, I want to get the explosion sound, and in there volume.dB, let's set it to 10. Let's see how that's going to work. A bit better, maybe 20. You do want to be really careful with volume because it gets very loud very quick. Okay, also on top of that, inside of the animation, this one is starting a bit too late. Let's put it earlier. Once again, this is the kind of thing that you can play around with for ages. I think that feels about right. With that, next up, we can open the item container. This one is the parent for the toilet and the parent for the crate. Which means if we are adding an audio stream player to it and save it, we also have the same thing inside of the children. Since they all have the same sound, container hit, we can place it inside of the parent. Next up, inside of the toilet, inside of the hit function, I simply want to get the audio stream player 2D and then play the sound. The same thing I want to do in the crate. So in there, audio stream player 2D and play. Once again, the hit method for the toilet and the crate are really similar. And you could probably outsource quite a bit of the logic to the item container parent. But anyway, let's try all of this. If I now go to we get a sound. That is quite metally. And next up, let's try the toilet. I think the nearest one is down here. There's a toilet. And this also has a sound. Perfect. That covers the item containers, so I can close them as well. And next up, we have to work on the item. And there, we actually have a bit of an issue. But let's go through it first. I want to add an audio stream player 2D to the item itself. And this one is getting item.mp3. You can just drag it in there. And now we have to figure out when to play it. This should happen when the player is colliding with it. So all the way at the end, before we are destroying the scene, I want to get the audio stream player 2D and play the sound. But that isn't quite going to work, and I hope you can see why. Basically, if I open a crate, we don't get a sound. And that is because we are playing the sound, but then right away we are destroying the scene. And once you have destroyed the scene, you can't hear the audio anymore. Which means we want to wait for Q3 until the sound is finished playing. That you can get with a wait, and I want to get the audio stream player and then wait for is finished. Although that is going to cause another issue. If I go back to outside and get rid of the drone because that's a bit annoying, I can now try all of this again. And if I now go to the crate, we still get the items, and if I collect them, we basically have the sound, but then the item sticks around for about half a second. So the issue for this one, in the item, once the player is touching them, we are playing the sound, and while the sound is playing, you can still see the item. And only once the sound is finished, we are destroying the node, which is causing a delay where it feels like we are touching the item, but the item doesn't disappear right away, which looks really weird. An easy workaround for that is to simply hide the sprite2d. So sprite2d.hide, and that fixes the issue. It's a bit of a workaround, but since the item is simple, this works just fine. If I try all of this one again, we can shoot the crate, and now the item disappears right away. So this is working just fine. Perfect. And well, I can basically continue like this forever. We could add a lot more sound, but I think for the purposes of this tutorial, this is all that we need. If you understand this so far, you can add sounds. It's not that difficult. Which means we have another important section covered.